Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Today we're going to do something a little differently. Stonemeyer Games has sponsored this video specifically asking for content creators to focus on the differences between older games and newer games. So I have here Euphoria, which is one of Stonemeyer Games' very first games they ever produced, and Finspan, which is one of their newest games that they ever produced. Now, these are designed by different people. This one is actually designed by Jamie Stegmaier. This one is designed by David Gordon and Michael O'Connell. This one, Alan Stone as well. But you know, the point of this video is just to show off some improvements that newer games have made as the industry has grown, but also to show you that some of these older games are still very relevant in today's massive board game industry. So first thing I want to talk about is theme. Now, this one you could take in many different directions. Euphoria is a very unique theme. It's about building a dystopia where you are wanting to subject your citizens to mindless labor. And so you actually want them to not be intelligent. You want them to simply just go out and do their jobs and, mine the materials you need for you to create a euphoria. Them to be happy, but they just don't understand why. It involves dice placement, where the dice are your workers. So it's a worker placement game with the aspect that the pip value on the dice represents the knowledge of that person. So if those pip values actually get too high, they start getting too smart, and they could walk away from your dystopia. So this is still a unique theme, but I don't think that in 2015, when Stonemeyer Games was designing Euphoria, that Finspan, a game about fish, a tableau building game about fish, was ever in their realm of possibilities. They probably thought no one in their right mind would ever buy a game that just showed off a bunch of fish. But this now is the world we're currently living in, where any theme is possible in the board game industry. So that's probably my first point, is that the theming has expounded exponentially. It's not that people couldn't have come up with the themes back then. They could have made a fish game, a game about fish back in 2015. But nowadays, with so many games coming out where Cthulhu has had its run of popularity, and birds and butterflies and fish and dragons have certainly had their popularity. City building, and not everything is just farms and workers and little meeples anymore. So the imagination of designers is definitely stretched. Beyond theme, the next thing I want to talk about that is actually a similarity is rule books. So both of these rule books obviously have been edited by Stonemeyer Games, so they have some say in there. And the biggest thing I want to talk about rule books is that even today and back then, rule books rule the day. It is an incredible hurdle to getting into a game if your rule book is not well written, not well organized, is filled with a lot of words, and just drags on and on and on. You can see that both of these are pretty small. Let's see, Euphoria's is a little bigger, and it's 12 pages. There's not much on that 12 page. This one is a little bit smaller and is 12 pages. So they're roughly the same size. Stonemeyer Games has always done an excellent job of producing concise rule books and making them flow well, making them easy to understand the game. Circling back to theme, but staying on the point that rule books are still the king and always have been, Stonemeyer Games has always done an excellent job of including in their rules how a mechanic or why a mechanic is included thematically, so why it fits in the game. For example, here in the Euphoria rulebook, they're explaining knowledge checks. Anytime you bring back your workers, you have to roll the dice out again. And if the total pip value of all of your workers plus their base knowledge, which is tracked on this chart over here, equals or exceeds 16, your workers have become too smart to what you're trying to do, and the smartest one will actually leave. Here it says your workers realize they're in a dystopia and you must discard one of the 5 knowledge workers. That's there. They were on the right track there. It helps me understand why we do a knowledge check at all in the game. Why do we have to check to make sure that the dice are 16 or less? Why do we want low numbers? Here in the Finspan rulebook, we can see that he literally says, thematically, this represents observing and studying fish in their habitats. So they have then gone even further in helping you introduce how the mechanics fit the theme. And for me personally, that helps me understand a game that much better. I try and do that when I do rules teach videos. If there is a way to thematically connect a rule that might be a little out there, a little harder to understand, I try and connect it to the game using the theme. So, all right, let's move on from rule books now, and we're going to talk about solo modes. So, Stonemaier is famous for their Automa, which they started introducing in their games in viticulture. Now, in the industry in general, Automa and solo modes and being able to play solo is definitely an increasing thing. Solo modes were easily not available as much as they are today. I think many designers are thinking going in right from the bat, how can I be able to play this game solo? It just opens up that much more of an audience. People don't always have the ability to play with other players or would want to play the game more often if they can play solo and with other players. So I think inclusion of the solo mode is definitely becoming more of an industry standard as we get into newer and newer games. Euphoria, which came out, roughly the same time as Viticulture, did not include an Automa out of the box. So we actually I had to pick up the Ignorance is Bliss expansion, which the main thing Ignorance is Bliss was adding to the game was the solo Automa. So you can play Euphoria solo. You can play, obviously, Finspan solo. It comes in the box. Now, the ways in which the Automa is controlled varies greatly from designer to designer and from publisher to publisher. Stonemaier Games has always done an excellent job of making the Automa as simple as possible, but they've perfected it here as far as Finspan is concerned. In Finspan, you're basically just flipping over a card, and we can find some here. And within that card, it's telling you to, in this case, it would tell you to gain a fish card. And this is letting you know that if that fish card has a group ability on it, that you can take that ability. Also, it would tell you to place one of their workers over on the on this board, the achievements board here, to count towards their total achievements for the end of the game, or for the end of the round. Here it's telling you to turn 3 fish, if it has it, into a school, to flip over 4 eggs into younglings, and then gain 2 eggs. Those are the only 2 types of cards. Now they vary in difference from one way or the other, but that's the basic solo mode in this game is so simple to run. It's almost laughable, but it works. It definitely puts pressure on you to meet a score, but it's not a beat your own score. It's a beat the solo Automa score. If we move over here to Euphoria, Euphoria utilizes a solo mode that is very similar to the solo mode that one could find in Gaia Project. So in this solo mode, you're going to be taking 2 cards, essentially. You're going to have flipped one over, and then you'll flip over a second one, and you're only looking at the middle. And so there might be some symbols up here that you would activate. You can see here, this one is going to be in the middle eventually. But here it's telling you, you actually in Euphoria have to run two additional factions, the black faction and the white faction. And it's telling you what action they're going to take. And this is telling you their preferred faction within the game. Here it's telling you a tunnel action and specifically the Euphoria faction. After you've played that, this one goes away, this one slides over, and the next time the automa takes a turn, you're going to flip over a new card, again, using the middle. So you would be able to see kind of where the automa wants to take their actions, where they want to focus on, but you don't quite know what their specific actions are going to be. This, again, is pretty simple at the end of the day, but it is a little bit more complicated. Also, I think the style of game changes how the automa has to function. In this one, you're physically putting dice out onto the board to block spaces or to increase the knowledge in certain areas. Here, you're basically just racking up points and cards for the automa. There is no reason for them to get in your way. They might steal a card from you, but you wouldn't know what that card was. Other than that, there's no reason for them to get in the way because this is a tableau builder where you're just focused on your own tableau. But the fact that solo modes are included now, most games now, unless it is just not possible, does not make sense. You know, a big party game or a whodunit game or something like that. Social deduction games don't make sense to play solo, but most games that it does make sense to be able to play solo have a solo mode included, and they have become even easier to run when they're done well. All right, now I want to talk about component quality. Now, this actually is I think the third edition, or maybe it's the second edition. It's the Mensa award-winning edition of Euphoria, which is at least the second edition. This one comes with game trays. It comes with the big, chunky wooden pieces for everything. It comes with these really nice, well-done dice. A lot of this was already included in the game in the beginning, but a lot of these like resources and things, a lot of the stars and things like that in the original printing were actually cardboard. But that was the standard back then. It was standard to have most of the pieces in your game be cardboard, and then there'd be cardstock, and then you'd have paper stock where necessary. Here you can actually see that Finspan is just cardboard, but there are no stars or eggs or anything like that. They do make upgraded components, however, for Finspan, but they are extra. So this is kind of a mixture with these two examples, because out of the box, Euphoria actually had the better components, but really Finspan didn't need the big chunky components. The cardboard tiles work well because you can just flip them over, younglings and eggs on one side. We do have little Meeple divers, which again is very thematic and very well done. I keep them stored in here. Let's see, here's the fish tokens you can see if you're not familiar with the game. But then we have the diver Meeples here, which are very well done because they look like little divers, and they're kind of small, but they function for filling up the spaces as necessary. So they're the size they need to be. But yeah, you can upgrade these components. You could upgrade some of these components too as well, I guess, with realistic looking food and wood and rock and gold and things like that. But the fact that the second printing here, or the second edition, came with game trays, came with the upgraded nice wooden components, just shows off that component quality is becoming more and more of a thing in current board games. And that also is probably one of the first things I will complain about in a review video. If the component quality of a game from especially a big time or well-known publisher is poor, I'm definitely going to let you know about it. Most recently, El Paso did not get a very good review from me because the components compared to Great Western Trail just felt very cheap. And I know they can do better because they've done better in 3 iterations of Great Western Trail. But there's a lot of cardboard when wooden components could have been used. And it felt cheap. And I felt like they definitely could have done better. So if you're not putting effort into your component quality nowadays, then your game is not going to be as successful in my opinion. So component quality is very important in the modern era of board gaming. The last thing I want to talk about when comparing newer and older games is the mechanics. Now, at the end of the day, mechanics are still the same. A worker placement game is still a worker placement game. A tableau builder is still a tableau builder. So if you enjoy a certain style of game, you certainly can look backwards and pick a game that utilizes that mechanic, and more than likely you're going to enjoy it. For me, that is deck building. I really love the deck building game mechanic, and so any game that I come across, old or new, that the main mechanic is deck building, I take a look at it. I give it a chance, per se. And older games, a lot of times there are a lot of hidden gems out there with deck building. But anyways, as far as the mechanics, the biggest difference I think between older games and newer games, and for those of you not familiar, this is the Euphoria board. This is the main board that everybody has access to, and you're placing out your workers in these locations. So these small gray boxes, only a single worker can go into. But these larger boxes is where the pip value actually matters, and the more knowledgeable the full workforce is in this area, you can see you're gaining more, they're more productive, but they're also going to get smarter. So they're going to increase this general worker knowledge pool, which you actually want to be low. There's lots of stuff going on here. It's a semi-busy board, but the game of Euphoria is essentially a worker placement game where the dice are your workers and the pip value. So that's a little bit of a unique aspect. Games like Feast for Odin or Agricola or things like that just have a pure meeple, and you just put the meeple down somewhere and you take that action. That's pure worker placement. So this one took that and tweaked it a little bit and said, all right, well, I've got my little worker, but that worker also has varying degrees of knowledge, and depending on the knowledge is depending on or the outcome of the action is dependent on how much knowledge they have. And also we talked about when we bring them back, if they're too smart, we actually, a worker walks away and we would have to convince him to come back or build a new one, activate a new one, things like that. This is actually a player board. So everybody sitting around the table playing Finspan would have a board like this one in front of them. And so you can see it has very specific spots to place your fish. There are various zones. So the sunlight zone, the twilight zone, and the nighttime zone, or I may have misread those, but obviously the deeper you go, the different type of fish than the ones that are going to be up towards the surface. And then you have different regions. So this blue region with the purple region and the green region. Certain fish can only go in certain regions, so that makes a difference. The estuaries here, or the deep dark way down here at the very bottom. But what they have done with this, because a lot of tableaus, including games like Everdell, which are incredibly popular, it does not really matter where you place your cards out. You can rearrange them however you want throughout the game. But in games like Wingspan, which Finspan is built off of, the Wingspan architecture, we'll say, it does matter where you place them. So Wingspan, the board kind of went left to right. Here you're kind of building them top to bottom. And the reason for that, if you're not familiar with Wingspan or Finspan, in this game in particular, is that you either have two basic actions. You're either placing a card into your tableau, paying the necessary resources for it, taking actions if it gives you actions, Or you can send in a diver. And when you send in a diver, they pick one of these 3 columns and they go top to bottom, moving all the way down, taking all of the actions of the fish that give you actions when you hit on them. And so where you place them does matter. Also, completing rows could matter very much for end of round or end game scoring, things like that. So they have taken a tableau builder along with, they've added in a little bit of an action selection mechanic. And then there's an engine builder, because obviously the more full up you have a column, the more actions you're going to be able to take. But then the question is, do you spread them out? Because certain columns, this column is going to give you cards. So these cards are what the fish are on that you're going to place out here. This column is going to give you eggs. All right, you need eggs to turn into younglings, which turn into schools of fish, and that's a big scoring mechanic at the end of the day. And this hatches your eggs into younglings and allows you to move your fish around into groups to create schools. So you can't just pile everything up here, because then you just have a bunch of cards in your hand, but no eggs, no younglings, no schools. You can't do the same thing either with one of these. So the strategy for this game becomes not only which fish do you put out, but where do you put them out? And so there's several mechanics working with Finspan. That's, again, not to say that Euphoria is a bad game. That's not to say that Feast for Odin or Agricola is a bad game. Feast for Odin, again, is just place a worker, take the action, and a lot of times you're building stuff out on your little personal board. But it's still a classic. It's still an amazing game. I feel like designers, similar to the theme, how they're getting more creative with their themes, they're getting more creative with their mechanics. They're taking multiple mechanics, they're mashing them up, mixing them together, see how they work. Perfect examples of this from other publishers are games like Lost Ruins of Arnak, or the Dune deck builder series, or Endless Winter. Those games all took the deck building mechanic and worker placement mechanic and mixed them together in almost equal parts, making this hybrid of a game. I would definitely still call Finspan a tableau builder, but it's got, again, a little bit of action selection, a little bit of engine building in it, and so it's not quite hybrid, but it's definitely mixing some stuff. So that's going to be my last kind of big point for the differences between old games versus new games. Again, my best advice for anyone who is going out looking for new games, don't necessarily just look for all the new stuff on the shelf. Go back and look at top 10 lists from various years, find the mechanic that you are interested in, go on BGG and search within that mechanic, and then filter the top 10. And you might be surprised that the top, within the top 5, 3 of them are over 10 years old, because some games are just classics and, will never go away, will never die, and will always be fun to play. Games like Agricola right now are getting a special edition printing from Awaken Realms in collaboration with Lookout Games. And it's doing incredibly well, because Agricola still stands the test of time, even with some people saying it was replaced by Caverna. It's still very popular today. People want that special edition. It's still Agricola at the end of the day with some fancy pieces. But that worker placement game still holds up. So that's my advice to you. Figure out what mechanic you like. If you don't know what your mechanic is, play lots of games, play lots of variety of games. I used to not think that I used to be just very into Ameritrash dice chucking games with miniatures and figurines and things like that. And then I got into deck building and I thought, all right, that's kind of my sweet spot. I didn't play a lot of Euros. I didn't play a lot of worker placement games until I gave it a shot. And actually my first worker placement game I ever played was Viticulture. I always thought, I don't want to play a game about winemaking. That seems silly. But it works really well. It introduced me to worker placements. Now I love worker placements. I love heavy Euros. I love deck builders. I mean, there's not very many games that I don't enjoy. or types of games I don't enjoy. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to end it here. Hopefully this was educational, if nothing else, a little interesting for you, just to discuss the differences between older versus newer games. If you feel like there is a big similarity or difference between older and newer games that you feel like I missed or didn't point out, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from them. I tried to come up with as good a list as I could without making this an hour-long video. But I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts as well. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.